I've already said this often enough, and you'll continue to hear me say it for the rest of this year, but 2019 is shaping up to be the year of the compact car. Our spotlight is on this 2019 Mazda 3 GT with premium package. This is the third generation and it improves on pretty much everything Mazda had going for the outgoing 2018 model. It is the evolution of their KODO design language, which is found on the CX-5 and the CX-9. Now the engine and transmission are more or less carried over from the CX-5. You have a little bit more power than the 2018 Mazda 3 GT, and it also adds cylinder deactivation. But this really is a bold new step for the manufacturer, especially at the entry level. And it doesn't make you feel like you're driving the entry level car anymore based on how much you get with this. So we're going to be showing you absolutely everything there is in a very thorough review of the 2019 Mazda 3 GT. So yes, the Mazda 3 is all new for 2019, much like the Volkswagen Jetta and the Kia Forte. There's also a lot of changes going on in the compact car segment, whether it's a facelift or a full generational update like the Mazda 3. As I mentioned, this uses the 2.5-liter naturally aspirated SkyActiv-G 4-cylinder engine found on the CX-5. It produces 186 horsepower. It also has Mazda's G Vectoring Control Plus, comes as front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, a 6-speed manual on some of the lower trims, but this one has the 6-speed automatic. And there are new safety technologies that have been implemented on this Mazda 3, including a driver alert system, along with lane departure alert, lane keep assist, blind spot monitoring, and rear cross traffic alert. They've also added smart city brake support on the rear on top of the front. So when you're backing up, it will automatically stop you if it thinks it's going to hit something. And you also have that same feature for the rear cross traffic alert system. Because this is the premium package, we also have things like radar cruise control. So this is pretty much fully loaded, like I mentioned. You're only missing the all-wheel drive portion, which on a day like today, we don't really need it, but we have heard great things about it, and we do plan on featuring the all-wheel drive Mazda 3 later this fall. Now, it's all great that they've put a slightly better engine in here and they've added in some extra goodies, but the mechanical changes are pretty significant, and it is something that we want to talk about. Much like the Volkswagen Jetta, this new Mazda 3 has removed a rear independent multi-link suspension in favor for a torsion beam. Most of the cars now in the compact segment are going this route. So it's not just Mazda, it's not just Volkswagen. It is a cheaper alternative to a multi-link suspension. And generally, most people won't notice a huge difference. But here in Quebec, where potholes are prevalent, you're going to be feeling it a little bit more in the back. Now, the exterior dimensions have also been improved, depending on how you look at it. Wheelbase on this vehicle is 26 millimeters longer than the previous generation. The length is up to 82 millimeters longer. The width is down actually 25 millimeters. They've shaved it off a little bit, probably in the mirror department. But the ground clearance has also lost 20 millimeters, and it doesn't sound like much, but it could make or break the difference if you're somewhere like here in Quebec, where you have a lot of snow. So 20 millimeters less, just to note. Again, it's still more or less in line with other compact cars in the segment. In terms of the other dimensions, the interior headroom is smaller than it was on the previous generation, along with rear legroom and the rear shoulder room. So you do have less in there. It's unfortunate if you have maybe 4 or 5 people you want to put in here, you might notice it. I do feel that the interior is a little tighter, and we'll talk about that when we jump inside. However, with all these changes, the cargo room, the space in the trunk has improved by 24 liters. So you have a little bit more storage in the trunk. And that again seems to be the trend in this segment, where a lot of manufacturers are putting more trunk space so that people can use it for vacations, trips, things like that. So let's talk about some of the cosmetic changes now. No more fog lights, at least sold here in Canada. It used to be LED, now there aren't any at all. But you still have adaptive LED headlights with LED high beams with automatic functionality. Because this is the GT, we also have the signature lighting on the front and the back of the vehicle. Again, you have smart brake support in the rear, as well as cross traffic alert on top of the smart city and smart city brake support that was on the front of the vehicle. You have rear parking sensors on the back, which is a great plus to have. There's also a lot going on with the windshield. It has windshield wiper de-icers built in on this model, and you also have integrated washer nozzles into the wiper blades themselves. So it's much easier and much safer when you're clearing off the windshield, whether you're driving or parked somewhere, have much better visibility while you're doing it. Side mirrors are auto dimming with memory. There's no power folding on this model here in Canada. I believe it is in Europe. And there's also keyless entry, and they've changed their key system. It is a different design than they were using before. Very similar actually to what Volvo uses. All the buttons are on the side, and it's a rectangular, almost chiclet style container. I find that it is a nice design. It just feels kind of cheap. There's no weight to it, and the plastic is a little light. It doesn't feel as solid as what you get from Volvo, but the design is different, something to note. But that's about all I want to talk about on the outside. Obviously, there's a lot of changes to the exterior. Design will be subjective no matter what, so whether you like it or not is up to you. But I want to jump inside now because there are a lot of changes going on the inside. Again, it is an all-new interior. There's some new tech going on in there that I want to go over. So let's jump into that, and then we'll take it on a road test. Everything's all new for 2019 in the Mazda 3. You have leather seating for the premium package, 10-way driver power, and a manual passenger seat. You have heated front seats, no heated rear seats, no ventilated seats either. I'm kind of expecting to see a signature trim for 2020 that will probably add things like rear heated seats and ventilated seats, considering a lot of the competition does offer it. You have a heated steering wheel plus a 7-inch screen in the cluster computer. We've seen that on the new CX-9. And you also have Mazda's active driving display. It's a color HUD. Mazda also says that the steering wheel is all new with illuminated controls, which could be helpful at night if you're driving along. There's no real ambient lighting in this car, so it is nice to have the steering wheel buttons light up so you can at least see what they are while you're driving. The biggest technical change is the new 8.8-inch infotainment system. It's all new, completely new interface, new design, works really, really well. We've been testing it quite a bit. Android Auto and Apple CarPlay come with it. Navigation, Sirius XM as well. It is much more elegant, much more user-friendly than the previous version. The navigation software itself has also been updated to look quite a bit better with a lot more detail than it had before. The interface is kind of similar actually to what we've seen on BMW. They're kind of using some of that inspiration from iDrive to be able to develop it, but everything works very well. Unlike when we saw in the Chevrolet Bolt, where they put a lot of graphical elements into it and it slowed the system down. There is a lot of graphics going on, but it doesn't slow down the system at all. There is enough processing power to keep things going. However, Mazda has removed the touchscreen ability for 2019. So you have to use their human-machine interface controller in the center, which is also all new. I think it works very well. Once you understand where all the buttons are, you can really do it without having to look down. So nice system going on there. Infotainment, really good. We're going to be testing it, hopefully in newer models coming out from Mazda, but we really do like it on this Mazda 3. They're also using a new 12-speaker Bose audio system in this car. They removed the woofers from the doors, usually at the bottom of the doors, and that helps not only for sound replication, you actually sound like you're sitting in front of the musician when you're driving, especially when it's set up for the driver profile. You really feel like you're sitting in front of the music that you're listening to rather than just being, in a car. So not only is the sound replication better, but because there's less holes in the doors, you have less rattle from the speakers and you have better sound insulation from the outside world. Aside from removing the woofers from the door, they've also improved the sound insulation through the roof and the headliner, as well as the floor and the floorboard. So you have better sound insulation. It really does sound nice and quiet while you're driving, especially on the highway. Very noticeable over previous generations. You have dual zone automatic climate control. That interface has been updated. They've also changed up the center console, moving the cup holders to a better position so they're not in the way of the HMI controller. You also have a much larger armrest, though you do lose out on vents in the center for the rear passengers. You only have floor vents back there, so that is something to note. Aside from that, you've got LED interior lighting, the new HomeLink system that you can see whether the garage is opening or closing through the interface, a pretty decent sized moonroof up top, and a leatherette style dashboard in the center here, again similar to what we can see on the Mazda CX-5. You have a softer material up top. It's a little mushy, but overall it's a little bit softer than your typical hard plastics, though the top of the door cards is pretty firm when it comes to the plastic material, and then leatherette throughout the door cards as well. So they really have improved the interior, even though it has gotten smaller. My daughter does fit in the back seat. I'd be a little tighter if I was sitting back there, and again with no heated outboard seats or vents in the center console, it's not necessarily a premium rear end. At least the gadgets and stuff up front really do make a difference. So let's take this car on a road test, go over everything else about the new 2019 Mazda 3, and figure out if this might be the next compact car for you. The Mazda 3 is still designed to be a commuter's car. It's meant to still be an entry-level vehicle, even though the interior here has gotten a hell of a lot nicer than it has from even, first generation especially. but this is still a very competent vehicle on the road, and that's what I really like about it. It's not the sportiest. It does have a little bit more power than most of the competition, but because they don't do a Mazda speed version anymore, it's not necessarily the quickest. I have no issues with the 186 horsepower engine because there's no forced induction. Theoretically, it should be more reliable down the road. There's less stress on the engine, and fuel economy is not too bad either. We'll talk about our final numbers when we go to wrap up the video, but so far they've been pretty good for a compact sedan such as this. As you see here, we're going around some corners. I'm seated directly in the middle. I don't get moved around too much. That's part of the G Vectoring Control Plus system that Mazda has across the board for their vehicles. We really like it. And you do have the option, if you wanted to make things a little sportier, you can put the car in sport mode and do manual shifting. Now, it does use the correct shift pattern as far as I'm concerned, pull towards you to shift up. And it is very quick for a 6-speed. And I think that's one thing that has always been kind of curious to me, why Mazda continues to use a 6-speed transmission. Most of the manufacturers now have gone with like a 7-speed, 8-speed, or even CVT, depending on which one you go with. But it works pretty well. I mean, it's not the sportiest again, but you know, gets the job done. I like it enough. You've got flappy paddles here on the steering wheel, so if you want to shift it that way, I usually prefer to keep it actually just in regular mode. I don't even keep it in sport mode. I find that the power on this is good enough without having to keep it in sport mode. Now, one of the things I don't quite remember being so bad when we drove the 2018s last year was the rear visibility. I find that it's just a little low in terms of what you can actually see out of the back. It's a little tough for me to see actual cars who are close behind me just because of the way that the trunk is designed and that rear parcel shelf. So some people might not have that issue, depends on how you sit. I could sit up a little bit straighter, but then I'd really be into the headliner of the vehicle here. It's a small thing to note. The rest of the visibility is good all throughout the car, whether you're looking on the front or the side. Mirrors are in a good position, and overall, again, as a commuter car, very good. Now, when it comes to the cylinder deactivation on here, Mazda doesn't have like a light to tell you that it's on. Some vehicles, not many of them, do tell you when it's switched over from, you know, an inline 4 to just 2 cylinders. It doesn't do it quite on this. It probably helps a little bit with fuel economy, but we have talked about it before. It could help in certain situations. The only thing I do notice, though, even though there is no auto stop start system on this, thank you, I do find when I come to a stop, even in full automatic mode, the car kind of jitters a little bit sometimes. Not in every situation. It feels almost like a dual clutch in a negative way. And I don't know if it's just maybe the cylinder deactivation's not mapped properly and it shuts off if you're idling, and then when you let off the gas it kind of comes back on a little bit. But I notice it enough that I'm talking about it. If it was once or twice, then I could just, you know, cough it off to the fact that the car's got 1,500 kilometers on it and it's new. But because it's happened probably about a dozen times already, I think it's something to note. I don't know if it's, again, just needing to be broken in, but keep that in mind. One of the major improvements Mazda claims to have done with this vehicle for the seating is they've looked at the way that people's spines are shaped and how our curve is so that you can actually sit into this a little bit more comfortable. My wife, for example, finds that the seats are too firm. I'm very comfortable in here as a huge person. I do feel that there is a good amount of space in the seat itself. It is a little tight in here, as we mentioned, for the dimensions, but I would say that they have improved. I never had any issues with the CX-5 seats. I know people have commented before saying that they didn't find those to be very comfortable either. I'd say take a look, get into them, try it out yourself, because again, much like the exterior design where it will be subjective, it will change for each person. Same with the seats. While I might be comfortable in here, you might not, but I haven't had any driver's fatigue. I've done quite a bit of long distance driving with this in the time that we've had it so far. And, you know, for the 3-4 hours in the car that I'm doing, I have no driver's fatigue whatsoever. But like I mentioned, because there's a few interior features missing from here, I do expect to see a signature model added. I don't necessarily expect to see the turbocharged engine added to this. Who knows? I mean, it was a bit of a surprise with the CX-5, but this car having a turbo really would be in Mazda speed territory. And I know that there have been articles written recently that Mazda has said that they do have all the technical components to revive the Mazda speed. I don't know if it's going to happen. I think it'd be fun. I think it'd be cool. Vehicles like the Volkswagen GLI that we just did would be good to have a competitor from Mazda Speed, but at this time I don't think it's necessarily going to happen, but I have been wrong once or twice in my life before. So how did the 2019 Mazda 3 GT fare during our testing? We managed 6.2 liters per 100 kilometers or 38 US miles per gallon on our 100 kilometer test loop and 6.9 liters per 100 kilometers or 34 miles per gallon during our 900 kilometer plus week. Not bad when we compare it to the other compact cars in the segment, doing better than the 2019 Subaru Impreza, but not quite as good as the 2019 Kia Forte or 2019 Volkswagen Jetta. As for our likes, the all-new Mazda Connect infotainment system can finally get a solid like from us, bringing a breath of fresh air to Mazda's technology suite. The exterior and interior design of the 4th generation Mazda 3 is also a hit for us, maturing the design language on this compact car and placing it high on our list of global vehicle designs. Engine performance from the 2.5-liter SkyActiv-G engine provided excellent power and responsiveness without sacrificing on fuel economy, and the overall safety technology such as the rear seatbelt reminders, integrated washer nozzles, and rear smart brake support helped to secure Mazda's position as a leader in safety when it comes to the compact consumer segment. Though we often find you have to take the good with the bad with any vehicle, especially a first year of production. We found that the interior piano black plastics were prone to scratching along with the gauge cluster plastic, with significant scuffing for a vehicle with 1,000 kilometers when we picked it up. The improvements made to the rear camera's resolution were great, but now the system suffers from too wide of a field of view, giving everything a heavy fisheye distortion. The lack of ventilated seats at this price point hopefully means a forthcoming signature trim which will be added to the mix in a year's time. However, the majority of vehicles in this segment offer ventilated front seats. Finally, the last miss for us is the lack of a rear center air vent for passengers, again something that a lot of the competition is providing. We understand that the redesigned center armrest and storage area prevents a vent from being equipped, but a compact sedan is still an ideal family vehicle, and rear occupants might feel the effects of having less directional airflow. Overall, the 2019 Mazda 3 GT is a superior vehicle over the model it replaces, but also firmly plants itself at the top of the compact consumer rankings. The Japanese automaker has once again proven itself as a serious competitor against the big dogs and shows that they're committed to building enjoyable premium cars as well as their crossover counterparts.